Welcome to another driving adventure with me, Mr. Sharp, where I complain about things in a non-structured way and often forget words. So the thing that's popped into my head recently is hover states, and I'll give a bit of context for this. I think I might have mentioned it in a previous video, but if not, I've been kind of tinkering with another side project. One where it's basically inspired by a bit of Flickr that's disappeared, I think. You take a photo of your desk and you circle the things that are on your desk and kind of share the technology that you're using, and because we techies like to find out what's new and fun and make our desks nice and kind of homely spaces. So I've got the process where you upload a photo into the browser and you can draw shapes onto the photo and you can add notes. And at the moment I'm using SVG for the shapes, and it does very nearly suit the image map element, which I know I mentioned to some people and they vomited a little bit in their mouth. But I quite like, those old elements that still work in browsers, and image maps is one of those. And the reason why I couldn't use an image map is because, as far as I could see, there was no CSS hover or pseudo selector hover support. So I wanted to kind of like, when you hover over it, change the opacity so that it was clear that there was something there. And I couldn't do that. And I think I couldn't style the areas, whereas in SVG I can style the polygons. But then, so you make the desk view, but then I was thinking about what happens when you visit my desk. You come to visit my desk. I wanted it to work so that I wanted to question whether or not I can get it to work without JavaScript, and the reason for that is not belligerence. It is, I like to defer as much native browser functionality to the browser. So for like style changes, I like to do it with CSS. For animations, I'd like to use CSS if I can. For links, I like to use HTML links. For buttons and form submissions, I like to use forms and the things that do it natively rather than kind of use JavaScript to do that work, because JavaScript can be used for something more effective. So I was thinking about how would the page, how would it be structured if you visit the page and you wanted the notes to be visible without JavaScript. Now, the way I was thinking is that I could maybe, I don't know if I can put a node in SVG inside a polygon. I've got a feeling I probably can't, but let's assume that it's possible. Or maybe I can put like a text node or some formatted text next to a polygon, and using CSS they are not visible, and when you hover over the polygon it does polygon plus div or whatever it's going to be. I know it's not a div, but it becomes visible, some transition to show that it's visible. Maybe I use absolute positioning within the context of the SVG to kind of put it at the bottom or the side, something like that. I was thinking that could work pretty well. I haven't like tinkered with this, it's just kind of a thought experiment at this point. But it brings me back to something that the great Jeremy Keith, two name drops, he's been mentioned twice now. In fact, no one else has been. I've not given anyone else name prompts, but I think it's because I read a lot of Jeremy's blog posts, but also I chat with him in person, which is helps if you speak to a human being. He said to me years ago, like a decade ago, that he and I'm probably paraphrasing badly, the CSS pseudo selector hover was functionality that doesn't belong in CSS because it's behavior. And I was always like, I don't know, Jeremy seems smart, so let's just take that on face value. And I couldn't kind of wrap my head around it very much because, I don't know, I'm not smart when it comes to actively thinking. Anyway, but I've been thinking about it more, and it actually makes a lot of sense. And this goes back to this idea of experimentation happens in JavaScript and works its way down the chain. And I think again, Jeremy has a talk recently, this in 2019, 2020, where he talks about these circles of, I can't remember what they're called, the circles of time, where they go fast on the outside and slow on the inside. And HTML and web standards and TCP, they're all on the inside, but HTML is one inner layer, CSS is an outer layer, and JavaScript is on the very outside. And if we think back, well over a decade ago, to do hover effects when your mouse moved over and to change text, it was done using images and JavaScript. On mouse in, on mouse over, on mouse out. That's how we did it. And some very kind of web famous code from Dreamweaver and I can't remember the other one, Fireworks, that would spit out this code and you would instantly recognize it, and it would be that hover code. And that experimentation happened in JavaScript, and then eventually worked its way into CSS as the hover pseudo element. You wouldn't dream of saying, change the color of a text when using JavaScript when the mouse moved in. Anyway, my point is, this is behavior, and behavior requires some interaction. And if I want that text to be there, and obviously there, as a like a progressive enhancement, it doesn't matter if the technology kind of layers on the top. But what I was thinking is that the behavior is an enhancement. Adding behavior to a web page and adding behavior. This SVG, just making the text appear using CSS, does not qualify as progressive enhancement, because it requires a behavior, a known behavior to like see that text, and that text is completely missing if you don't have that behavior, if you have no way of executing that behavior. Oh gosh, about to run into my neighbour. My neighbour's van. So I was wondering if the CSS hover selector is the right thing to use, and it probably isn't if I want to truly have it progressively enhancing with behaviors and so on. So yeah, anyway, some thoughts about hover elements as I bang into the wall. Bye.